Listen now for God's word from the second chapter of Matthew's Gospel. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel."
What child is this who laid to rest on Mary's lap is sleeping, whom angels greet with anthems sweet, while shepherds watch are keeping? This is Christ the King, whom shepherds guard and angels sing. Haste, haste to bring him, Lord, the babe, the Son of Mary.
Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was.
Why lies he in such mean estate, where ox and ass are feeding? Good Christian, fear, for sinners hear the silent word is bleeding. Nails, spear shall pierce him through, the cross be borne for me, for you. Hail, hail the Word made flesh, the babe, the Son of Mary.
When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
So bring him incense, gold, and myrrh. Come one and all to own him, the The King of Kings salvation brings. Let loving hearts enthrone him. Raise, raise the song on high. The Virgin sings her lullaby. Joy, joy, for Christ is born, the babe, the Son of Mary.
Much of life these days has a kind of apocalyptic feel to it, a sense of unraveling and encroaching chaos that threatens to overtake us. Even politicians and writers are using images that to me at least, have a distinctively biblical feel. We're 2 weeks now into what has been described as a very dark winter, or the most difficult time in our nation's health history. The reality of collective grief hovers in our midst like gloom, low-hanging clouds that block any sign of distant light. The fleeting hope of Christmas has come and gone, a new year has begun, and the difficult truth is that much about our lives and the world feels the same. And just when we might be tempted to give in to the post-Christmas blues and the communal despair, the church in its wisdom, the church in its discipleship, the church in its persistence offers up one more holy day in this sacred season. Just when the nights are darkest and the days shortest, we are reading and singing and preaching and praying all about light. Light, arise, your light has come. The timing of this day is at best paradoxical, even in a normal year. And we all know there is nothing normal about the time in which we're living. So how are we to mark this day of light in winter darkness? What might God be asking of us on this holy day, set against a backdrop of grief and sadness? I don't know about you, but I always experience at least a little bit of a letdown as the joy and the beauty of the holidays gives way to a long January gloom. Each year, about this time, I return to the vivid post-Christmas image described in W.H. Auden's oratorio, For the Time Being. Auden writes, well, so that is that. Now we must dismantle the tree, putting the decorations back into their cardboard boxes, some have got broken, and carrying them up to the attic. The holly and the mistletoe must be taken down and burnt, and the children got ready for school. There are enough leftovers to do warmed up for the rest of the week. Not that we have much appetite, having drunk such a lot, stayed up so late, attempted quite unsuccessfully to love all our relatives, and in general grossly overestimated our powers. Once again, as in previous years, we have seen the actual vision and failed to do more than entertain it as an agreeable possibility. Once again, we have sent him away. I am haunted by Auden's words every year. For here at the beginning of January, it's back to the real world, the one we left behind if we were lucky for a day or two over the holidays. Once again, we have sent Christmas away, packed up in cardboard boxes and stored in the attic until next December. And this year, we may not even have the benefit of leftovers, since those large family gatherings were yet another casualty of this dark winter. And yet, we who spend the month of December, the season of Advent, singing and praying and reading and hoping for light shining in the darkness, must not send that light away so easily, so apathetically. There is something about the vision we have received that will not let us go, even as we pack up boxes and lower expectations. There is something about us that longs for it, even as we doubt its reliability, that knows we need it, even when we can't quite believe it. Auden describes it this way: to those who have seen the child, however dimly, however incredulously, the time being is, in a sense, the most trying time of all. We can repress the joy, but the guilt remains conscious, remembering the stable, where for once in our lives everything became a you and nothing was an it. Today, as our calendars turn to another year, the church insists on Epiphany. The word describes a striking revelation or a sudden insight. Mine usually come in the middle of the night. I've always been grateful that I was ordained on Epiphany 13 years ago this week, for on Epiphany we hear again the story of those three seekers, magi, kings, wise men, who traveled from afar following a star to the place where the Christ child was. It's such a beautiful story, such a compelling narrative, the vision that drives them on, the prophecy ringing in their minds, the political intrigue, the journey itself, the star always before them, the treasures of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, the child with his mother Mary. Epiphany is a testament, an annual witness to the church's conviction that the Christmas story does not end in a stable in Bethlehem. No, the vision reminds us that the time being is the time that matters most. The journey reminds us that we, like the Magi, are still seeking, still following, still journeying on in search of the truth that leads to worship and overwhelming joy. I believe that we who might be tempted to give in to the post-Christmas letdown can take some degree of comfort in the story of these Magi. For when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, they missed it entirely. They were still many miles, and by some accounts, many months away. They were duped by King Herod and surely dealt with all the complications and difficulties of holiday travel. And what about you? What about us? What about this year? How many of us longed to experience the joy of Christmas but simply could not get there, not this year? How many of us need another shot at Christmas joy? Another chance to grasp the meaning of the incarnation, God with us. For us, the story of the Magi gives us this blessed assurance. It's not too late. For what distinguishes these three is not their punctuality, but their persistence. They didn't give up. They journeyed on, and in the seeking, they found the truth. The same can be true of we modern-day seekers. A couple of weeks before Christmas, I received a phone call, a message, an unusual question. The message came from Stuart Goodwin, an elder in our congregation and executive director of the Indiana War Memorial. Stuart is also a retired brigadier general, and so very good at getting right to the point. When I called him back, Stuart said, "I need a religious perspective on a situation we're facing." He had my full attention. The situation was that the downtown Indy business community was requesting that the Christmas tree on Monument Circle, which is owned and managed by the War Memorial, remain lit beyond Christmas and well into the new year. Stuart wondered how a pastor would feel about this, wondered whether our faith tradition had any wisdom to offer or perhaps regulations to follow. This specific question has stayed with me and expanded in my mind in the weeks since Stuart called. In fact, I called him back just before Christmas because I wanted to know what had been decided. "Well, Pastor, I think you'll like the decision," Stuart said, sharing that the Shining a Light production had indeed been extended. A good choice. A witness to the reality that all of us need a little more light in our lives this year. It was just what I needed to hear because this is just what I wanted to say to you this Epiphany Sunday. That the light shining in the darkness that we welcomed on Christmas morning has not gone out, but it has gone on. If we want to be a people who walk in the light of Christ, we're going to need to follow it into an unknown future. So, Second Church, please do keep those Christmas lights up. Keep them up in your homes and in your yards. Keep your candles lit. Keep shining your light into the darkness. And as you do that, don't stop looking for signs of light around you and beyond you. Remember the Magi. They could have given up, but something propelled them forward. No longer content with standing still, they became perpetual seekers, following what? Matthew says it was an unusual star. I believe it was also a vision. The vision of one who would bring purpose beyond what they could imagine. And so the Magi became seekers of the light. This week I've noticed a common theme both in my individual encounters and in the broader realm of media and commentary. There is a yearning among us this year. A deep desire for something different. And I'll confess to a bit of cynicism about the outsized hopes expressed with the turning of the year this week. I mean, it is a bit strange when you stop to think about it that this yearning, this desire, this sense of expectation and raised hope is pinned on one particular day, no different from the day before it. After all, what's to distinguish January 1st from December 31st except our created calendars? But then a different thought entered my mind late on Thursday night. What if this rising hope is more about us than our calendars? Let me tell you a story. Once there was a man who had a dream of a heavenly city where everything was perfect. Weary of his own life in a broken world, he decided to go in search of this heavenly city of his dreams. Gathering what few belongings he had, the man set out on his journey, and all day long he walked. And as he walked, he had but one thought, one image, one dream, the heavenly city that would one day be his home, how perfect it would be when he arrived. All day long he walked, and all day long he had this one thought until evening came. And the man had not yet arrived at the heavenly city of his dreams. He decided to make camp right where he was, and so taking out his crust of bread, he gave thanks to God and ate. And then just before the man went to sleep, he took off his shoes and he pointed them in the path, facing them in the direction that he would continue his journey the next day. And then the man lied down and went to sleep. Little did he know that in the middle of the night, a trickster came along, picked up his shoes, and turned them around, facing them in the direction from which the man had come. Early the next morning, the poor man, this unfortunate soul, awoke. Taking out his crust of bread, he gave thanks to God, ate his crust of bread, and then he walked out onto the path and found his shoes. The man began walking in the direction that his shoes were facing. All day long he walked, and as he walked, he had but one thought, the heavenly city of his dreams, and how perfect it was going to be when he arrived. He walked until almost evening, when he looked off in the distance, and there he saw it. The heavenly city of his dreams. Now, it wasn't quite as large as he thought it was going to be. It didn't shine quite as much as he had expected, and to be honest, it looked strangely familiar. The man continued to walk until he found a strangely familiar street, and he turned down that strangely familiar street, and he walked until he found a strangely familiar house. And he knocked on the door, and when the door was opened, he was greeted by a strangely familiar family. And the man went inside and lived happily ever after in the heavenly city of his dreams. Matthew concludes his short story of these three wise men by saying that the Magi, following the instructions of a dream, returned home by another way. I can only imagine that they returned home as new people. I can only imagine that the home to which they returned did not look the same either. Having seen the vision, the light of God in all its glory, how could they not be changed? Beloved, it's just another day on the calendar. The darkness persists. The grief is still there. That's one way to see it. Here's another. Something has forever shifted, permanently changed. Everything can be different now because everything must be different now. We are changed by the light of this vision. We have seen the child. We have witnessed the truth. We have been transformed by the light of God. Arise and shine, for your light has come. In his masterful 4 quartets, T.S. Eliot writes, "With the drawing of this love and the voice of this calling, we shall not cease from exploration. And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." Happy Epiphany, Second Church. Happy New Year. Amen.